Hey friends, today we're talking about solving equations. So grab your calculator because remember, we can use calculators on this unit. The first step I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my streets. Okay, just like we added and subtracted, multiplied and divided before, we do the exact same thing. This time we're just working with decimals and fractions. So, who's bothering x? The 25/100ths in example 1. So how do you undo multiplication? You undo it with division. So whatever we do to one side, we do to the other, and these cancel out, which is the goal because we want x by itself. And 16 divided by 25/100ths gives us 64. Remember, we can always check our work. So if I take 25/100ths times 64, I get 16. So I know that this works. Okay, in example 2, who's bothering x? A -4 7/10. So I'm going to divide both sides by the -4 7/10. And on this side, these cancel out and I'm left with x, and I get a positive 2 3/10. Now let's check our work. -4 7/10 times 2 3/10. And again, it gives me -10 81/100ths, so I know it works. Okay, you go ahead and try these and I'll be back in just a second to show you what I did. Okay, my first step was to draw my streets. So grab your red pen, and if you didn't draw them, it's okay. That's just a strategy, but I'm going to draw them. So make sure that you check with a red pen all of your work, not necessarily exactly the way that I do it. So now who's bothering the 8/10? We know, or excuse me, the x, we know that it's 8/10. So we're going to undo multiplication with division. So we're left with x on this side because these cancel out. That's the goal. And 6 4/10 divided by 8/10 is 8. And if we multiplied 8/10 times 8, we would get 6 4/10. So we know that it checks. Okay, on this one, who's bothering the letter P? -2 8/10 is being multiplied, so to undo that, we have to divide. And when we divide on both sides. So we're just left with our variable on this side, and over here, a positive divided by a negative is a negative, and 4 2/10 divided by 2 8/10 is 1 1/2, or 1 5/10. Let's check our work. So when I check my work, it checks. Okay, make sure that you always check your work with a calculator. You shouldn't ever get any of these wrong. Okay, let's look at some different examples now. What if we have to write the equation ourselves? Okay, the first step of the problem solving process is to circle all of the key information and then underline what it is that you have to do, whether it's a question or a command. Okay, so in this problem, I have Jay's coach agreeing to buy them ice cream, and each ice cream cone costs $2.40. They want us to write and solve an equation to figure out how many cones the coach bought with $30. So they want n to represent the number of ice cream cones. So let's underline that because that's important as well. And then we want each cone to cost $2.40. So $2.40 times n, or 2 4/10 n, equaling the total, which was the $30. Okay, so that's what it's equaling. Now let's draw our streets and let's solve. Who's bothering n? The $2.40. So we divide the $30 by 2.4. And our answer is 12 1/2. Okay, logic says that if I can buy 12 1/2 cones, I'm not going to walk up to somebody and say, "Excuse me, can you cut that cone in half?" So, do we round down or up? Okay, in this case, it defies the laws of rounding. Instead, we can say, he can buy 12 ice cream cones. Okay, we're not allowed to say the 12 1/2 because you can't buy half of a cone. And we're not allowed to say 13 because we don't have enough money to pay for 13. So, does that mean I shouldn't show my work steps? No, I need to see every single work step involved in this problem. And then you conclude that he can only buy 12. All right, your turn. What if the coach instead buys $42? Go ahead and write the equation and solve. Okay, so this time each cone is $2.80. So 280x equaling 42. Let's draw our streets. And we're going to divide both sides by 280, or $2.80. So in this case, it comes out a nice, well-rounded integer. So the coach can buy 15 cones. Okay, let's look at another one. What if we have fractions in front of the x? So let's look at these examples. This time I'm going to divide by 3/4. Okay, we know that a division of 3/4 is really just like multiplying by the reciprocal. But we have a calculator, so in this case we can just take 12 divided by 3/4 and we know our answer is 16. Because we know that 12 over 1, and then we change it to multiplication and we flip the 4/3 over. And then we simplify. 3 goes into 12 4 times, it goes into itself once, so our answer is 16. Over here we're going to divide by a negative 7/5 on both sides. And when we do, I get a nice long crazy decimal on my calculator. So I'm going to hit that button that says second, because I have a TI 34. And then I'm going to look for the button that says fraction to decimal. And when I do that, I get a negative 3 4/7. Remember, you can always plug them back in to check your work. Okay, your turn for these two. Go ahead, grab your calculator, draw your streets, and make sure that you check your work. When you're finished, grab your red pen and watch what I do. Okay, both of these are going to be dividing by fractions. So when I divide, I get negative 12. Because 9, and then I keep the 9, I change it to multiplication, and I flip over the negative 4/3. 9 and 3 share a 3 in common, and 3 times 4 is 12, and a positive times a negative is a negative. Over here I'm dividing by 7/8, but it's a negative 7/8. And on my calculator, I have to simplify it a whole bunch of times. When you see a down arrow, that means that you need to hit the button that has a little triangle to the side, and it says SIMP, which means simplify. And so I get a negative 3/8. And I can always check my work. Okay, over here, let's look at a problem where we have to write the equation. Val needs 2 1/3 yards of fabric to make each hat for the school play. Write and solve an equation to find out how many hats she can make with 6 yards of fabric. Okay, so we know we have this 2/3 yards, and we know that I have to use, we know that each one uses 2/3 yards, and we know I have 6 yards. So 6 yards is my total. And the 2/3 yards represents the number that I need for each hat. And the N represents the number of hats. So in this case, I'm going to divide by 2/3, or again, it's like flipping it over and multiplying. Okay, you can do it either way. In this case, I'm left with the 6 and the 2 simplifying and getting a 3, so I'm left with N equaling 9. If you did it the other way, it would look like this, and again, you would just plug it in your calculator to check your work. All right, your turn. Try Sam's problem, and I'll be back in just a second to show you what I did. Okay, so here's what I underlined and circled. Okay, so Sam scored 4 out of 5 on the test. That means they got 4 questions out of every 5 correct. And she answered 8 questions correct. So this 4 out of 5 equals the 8. And we want to figure out how many questions were on the quiz. So if we take the number of questions on the quiz, and then we multiply it by our 4/5 or our score, we get 8. So we're going to divide by 4/5 on both sides. And when we do that, We can also keep, change, or we can just plug it in our calculator. And the 8 and the 4 simplifies, so we get 10 questions. And that's all I have for you today, and I will see you next time.